So
So I cannot repeat it again. That's fine. This is just an introduction. We just started the recording now. So let's move on to the slide here. And I was asking you guys, like, have you ever seen such a kind of issues in your system? So let's say I have two members in my team who is trying to install a particular software. Let's call it as Git file. Like when we download the Git software, we will have like git.exe, which both the team members were trying to install. Okay, let's say it has some X and Y dependencies. Let's say, let me also take a paint for this to better explain this. So let me take you a new file. So the whole concept here is, now the target over here is we need to install a software in two machines. So this is machine number one and this is machine number two, and he is the team number one and he's the team number two. So this installing a particular software needs some dependencies. Git.exe is the software that one needs to install, and it needs some dependencies, like X is the one dependency and Y is the other dependency. So, and by default this knowledge is not there with both the team members. So this team member one who is working on this particular project don't have any idea on these dependencies, as well as the team member two who is in the team working to install the software don't have any understanding on this dependency by. Okay, so let's say team member one don't have any knowledge on dependency X, and team member Y don't have any knowledge on dependency Y. Let's say by default, without his knowledge, team member one has dependency X already installed in his machine. Similar fashion, team member two has dependency Y installed in his machine without his knowledge. This team member one doesn't have any knowledge of the software installed or the dependency installed. So what is that he need more is he needs Y and team member two needs X, right? So that is the whole thing that is needed. So when team member one is trying to install git.exe, he will get, when now he's trying to install software called as git.exe, and it's in progress. At one point of time he got an error saying like these are the dependencies that are needed to be installed, and he don't have any knowledge on how to install that. Okay, so that there he got stopped with installing this git.exe. And the other team member who has something like, who is trying to install git.exe, he's able to successfully install git.exe, and by default this dependency X also got added to his machine. Okay, somehow this X also got installed and he is able to successfully install this software in his machine, right? So now team member one failed to install this software because of some X and Y reasons, but team member two is successfully able to install this software because he has all the dependencies that are needed to install this particular executable file. Okay, so these are some things which we frequently encounter when we work as a team, right? So some people will be able to install successfully, and some people might not be able to install successfully. So what is the resolution for this? He has to dig deep into the issues, and he has to analyze more on this installation part, and he has to again try that resolution. And when he keeps on doing that, at some point of time he would be able to successfully install the software. So this is the scenario. So for one member it would be difficult to install the things, and for other team member it is difficult to, it became easy for him to install that particular software. So now to avoid this particular challenges in installing a particular software in an OS, the Docker provided an easily or readily available solution for installing any kind of softwares on any OS. And on the final day, what is our challenge? On the final day, the only thing that we were targeting is, as we talked earlier, container has all the softwares that is needed, and that needs to be installed automatically on the hardware that is there. And when installing the software on any hardware, we shouldn't come across any issues. It should be a smooth process because we are relying on the container or the data that the developer is providing, and we were just trying to deploy the same on the hardware. So when we are installing these softwares or the executables that are packed in the container on the hardware, it should be a smooth process, right? It should not be like, again, we have to analyze the defects and the installations. We cannot do all the stuff, but it has to be a smooth process. So when we do it manually, we are encountering some issues, but the Docker actually made it simple for us. So what actually Docker is doing is, Docker is trying to fix the issues with these installations, with these kind of installations. So what is the flow when we are installing a software? We download the installer, we run the installer. When we get some issues, we will troubleshoot that, rerun the installer. When we get the issue again, we will troubleshoot that, rerun the installer. This process keeps on continuing until unless we successfully install the software, right? So that is the whole intention, and Docker is something which made this process very easy and very compatible with any kind of softwares or any kind of hardware systems or the operating systems, right? And now let's look at how actually this Docker is achieving it, and what is this containerization and all this stuff. Now, before moving on to how actually Docker is doing that, we just need to understand what is Docker and why we use Docker. Okay, so let's get answered these two questions, and then we will move forward. So what is basically a Docker is? So Docker makes it really easy to install and run software without worrying about setups or dependencies. So when we see this paint over here, the only challenge here is when we install a particular software, we don't know what are the actual requirements of that software. Maybe some needs like Visual Studio Code, or I mean Microsoft Visual Code is needed for few softwares. For few softwares, a few other dependencies are needed for that to particularly run on any kind of machines, right? So that is something which is very important to understand that. To understand the dependencies may not be possible for everyone, except the operations team may have good knowledge on that, because they constantly work on installing the softwares, right? So to eliminate any kind of human interventions in these installations, Docker came up with a solution, and let's talk about that solution later. So for now, the only thing that you have to understand about the Docker is a solution for installing the softwares without relying, or whatever can be the dependencies or setups, the Docker will take care of them and it will successfully install the things onto your machine. So that is what you have to understand when you say why to use Docker. So Docker makes it really easy to install and run softwares on any OS or any hardware systems without worrying about the setups and dependencies that are really needed to run that software. Okay, so that is something you have to understand when you say why use Docker, or you may be asked what to use Docker. Okay, so now what is Docker? Docker is not a single system, it is a platform of tools. When I say tools, these are all like different tools that are available within the Docker, and each one of this has a different purpose. And at this point of time, it is not a right time to dig deep into different kind of these things, but we will encounter each and every of this particular tool set in this Docker ecosystem at later point of time. But for now, you should be able to answer what is Docker. Docker is a platform or uh, ecosystem of multiple tools or softwares, and they are used for running containers. So these are used to for running containers. You know what is a container? We discussed it already, and now we will discuss more about the containers later, and you have a minimal idea on the on the container right now, and that should be sufficient to understand what is basically a Docker is. Docker is an ecosystem of different projects, tools, and pieces of software. So inside this, we have tools, and we have softwares, and we have projects as well. That's a different story. So for now, you should be able to answer what is Docker and why we use Docker, and what Docker actually made simple for the users. Okay. So now you understand what is a Docker as well. Docker is simply an ecosystem which has multiple set of tools. Okay, is this clear?
Yes, Mohan.
For now, don't bother about the different tools, understanding different tools, but just understand Docker as an ecosystem which has multiple tools, softwares, and the and different projects. You can consider it that way. and the definition is simply over here. Docker is a platform or ecosystem around creating and running containers. So what is this Docker basically used for? Docker is used for running the containers. Okay, right. So now moving on to the next slide. So now we encountered two different terminologies again. What is an image and what is a container? So these two things we should be able to understand now. So we understand what is Docker and we have some knowledge on what is container, and we also understood why we use Docker, what is the use of Docker, and what Docker actually simplified uh, in this process, right? Now let's understand what is an image here. Image is, you can understand this as a blueprint. Okay, blueprint in the sense, image is a single file with all the dependencies and configurations required to run a program. Okay, to run a program, it can be a web application. Let's say I have a web application which I have to run. Okay, let me take this onto the Paint now. Okay, so now we are trying to understand the image and the container, right? So image is, what we understand from the image. Image is a single file with all the dependencies and configurations required to run a program. Okay, so this is a file. Understand the difference between image and container very clearly. This is just a file. Okay, and this file have the data. Like, let's say this as a, let's consider this as a script in the director's hand. In the director's hand, he will have the script on what actually he want to convert this as a movie, right? So whatever that is there on the director script, he will just make this into a visualization form, which is like a movie, right? At the end of the day, this script, what is there on the paper, will be converted into a movie in the theaters, right? So this is the best example I can give for you. So image, you can consider it as a script. This contains what all are the dependencies that are required, what are all the configurations that are required, and what is the web app that you want to run. All these details will be there in this particular image, and vice versa. In our example, this is the director script, and now this director script has to be converted as an into visualization form with the actors in place, right? So, and that needs to be released into the theaters for the audience. So the same image which is equal to the script will be converted into container. Container is the visualization form of the image file, or the actual installation of the software's actual readiness of the OS for this web app to run. All that will be converted into the real time in this container. So this container is something which is like a real form of this image, which actually can run the web app. That is what basically a container is. And we call this container as an instance of an image that runs a program, and this movie is an instance of the script. So on the final day, this is something, a replica of the script but in a different form. So the container is also a replica of the image or an instance of an image, but it's like a different form. It's like a visualization form. It can actually run the program or the web application that we want to actually run. Okay, so that is basically what is an image and what is a container is. And let's not bother about how to create, how image basically looks like, and how container actually looks like, how this actually will be able to run the web app. That for sure will come in future. But for now, the only thing that you have to understand is what is actually an image and what is actually a container, and how the container will be derived, whether a container can be derived from the image or not. So these are all the things that are important for you now. So the definitions are also placed over here. Image is a single file with all the dependencies and configurations required to run a program. The program is nothing but the web app that we want to run. So this file contains all the dependencies and configurations, and these dependencies and configurations will be actually incorporated onto the hardware in this container. So this container is responsible to actually implement them onto the hardware and to run the web app. Is this clear? So we came across few terminologies. One is client, one is container, and the other one is image. And we also understood what is the actual use of containerization in this DevOps platforms. So how it is eliminating the dependencies from the operations to the development team. So we understand why we use Docker and what is Docker. So this much we have learned still now. Hope this is clear for everyone. If yes, we can move further to the other things. Hello.
Clear, clear,
It's clear, right? Okay. So now, before starting to this Docker, let's talk about what are the prerequisites that are actually needed to run the softwares. So the first and foremost important thing is, as we are working on the Docker, we have to get ourselves registered into a website called as docker.com. Docker.com is the website which is the official website for the Docker. So from there, once you register to this docker.com, you should be able to download the required software uh, onto your local system. So this is the Docker website. Developers love Docker, business trust it. This is all a different story for now. Let's directly dig into what actually we need. So first of all, we need to sign into our Docker ID. So when it is your first time, you just need to sign up and get yourself registered into this Docker website. So I registered with my ID already. So I'm just signing into this Docker now. So once I signed into this dockerhub.com, so you will see something called as download for Windows. If you are on Mac, you'll directly see it as download for Mac. If you are Linux, you will see directly as download for Linux. So you will get the relevant link on depending on the OS on which you are on. So you can just directly download it and you will get an executable. Just double click that and it will start running your. Okay, so it will basically start running the Docker into your local machine. So once it is installed, so you will be able to see something like this icon on your local system. So this is the Docker icon that you will be able to see. Once you double click on this, you will see something like this. So if you sign out from this, you will not see something like this. So once you sign out from this particular Docker, so what you will see is you again need to sign in so that you can directly use the Docker on your local machine. Without signing into your particular Docker, you cannot do anything in the local. So that is something which is important after installing your Docker, after registering onto your Docker and installing your Docker into your local machine. So you just need to provide your password over here. And if you don't have a shortcut over here, and it will be by default added over here as well. So right click on it. So here you will have options to restart the Docker or sign into the Docker and all the stuffs. Let's understand these things later. But for now, just try to sign into this Docker with the same username and the password that you gave when you registered for the Docker. So now I successfully signed up to the Docker and I also installed the Docker in my machine. And one most important part here is maybe for the first time you will not be able to install the Docker and you will come up and across asking you to install Linux kernel. Okay, so in the error that you get, you will also get a link to download the Linux kernel. Just double click on that, download it and run that exe file. So that Linux kernel which is needed for this Docker, and it's a prerequisite, I'm just saying, and why it is actually needed I'll tell you later when we really understand the architecture and how this Docker is actually working. So then you will understand what is the importance of Linux kernel installation with the Docker as well. So but for now, you keep in your mind as you also need to install. You will come up with an issue when you just install this executable file, because you also need the Linux kernel installed into your machine. So to actually install that, once you install this Docker, you'll get an error, you'll get an error link, and once you click on that error link or the help link, you will be redirected to the Linux kernel download link. So download it, install it, and you keep. Once it is installed, you will be successfully able to set up your Docker, and you will be able to sign into the Docker as well. Okay. So that is pretty much about the installation. And if you have any issues when you're installing your software, you can reach out to me at any point of time. I'll be available all the time. So that is something which I have to highlight over here. Once it is installed, you'll see something like this over here. So these are all different things. You for now you know the brief introduction of what is images, what a container is, and let's talk about these volumes and all the stuffs later point of time. But in the today's session we will be mostly understanding what is an image, what is a container, how to create a container, or how to convert images to container, and all these stuffs, how to create images, how to actually deploy our apps onto these images. This is all things what we understand today. So now we also cleared about how to actually install or register ourselves onto the Docker, right? So that is the next step you have to do, right? So now let's understand how actually this Docker will work out. Okay, right. So to actually start working with the Docker, let us blindly understand few things. For now, I'll not give you the actual explanation of this, but I'll tell you what actually this particular Docker will do. Okay, so now before going into the actual practical implementation, we also need to understand the next slide in the PPT, which is this one. So how actually this Docker works on the Windows or Mac is, so there is two separate softwares that will be available. One is Docker client, or Docker, we call this as Docker CLI, which is command line interface. And also we have something called as Docker server, which is like Docker daemon. Do you know what is daemon is? Daemon is a light-weighted thread or no priority thread. So it will just run in the background and it cannot stop the system. It cannot stop the system from shutting down or stopping the services. Okay. So to keep an example, to just give you an example, when you shut down your system and you have a notepad, which is not saved, then what basically you will get out is, the Windows will ask you whether whether you want to save this notepad or not, right? So that is something you will see when you want to shut down your mission and you have an unsaved notepad. So that is something called as priority thread. So priority threads have the ability to stop the I mean to stop the termination of any kind of softwares. But daemon is a thread which is like low priority thread, and it doesn't have the capability to stop the system from termination or shutting down. That is what. So if it is a daemon, if the notepad is a daemon thread, the notepad will not have the ability to stop the restart or the shutdown of this mission. As it is a priority thread, it got that capability. If it is a daemon, it will not have that capability to actually stop the restart of the mission or shutting down of a particular running software. Do you got what a daemon is?
Yes, Mohan.
Yeah. So Docker CLI, is that clear for everyone? Can you please respond, or else I'm ready even to repeat that, but because this is the core for everything in the Docker. If you understand this, the rest will be easy for you, or else you will struggle at the other point of time. Prakash, Ganesh, Venu.
Okay, Mohan. Up to
Just Ganesh. Bhai Venu అర్థమవుతుందా?
Yes, bhai.
Let me know if you're not getting something, because in the entire DevOps, these two tools are very important. That's why I'm just stressing over here. So with this, we understand, like we were on this slide. So we have two things. One is Docker CLI, tools that we are going to use, that we're going to issue commands through. And the Docker server is actually responsible in creating the images, running containers, etc. So now let's understand what is this Docker is. So this is the CLI of the Docker. On this CLI, we will give some commands like Docker run. So this is one of the Docker commands that I'm giving. Hello world. Okay. Once I gave this command on the command line, so I told you like this is how Docker works in the behind hoods. So we will have something called as Docker CLI, which is command line interface. So this is the command line interface. On this command line interface, I'm giving some command. So once I gave this command, it reaches out to the Docker server, okay, which is the Docker server, and this Docker server is responsible for creating the images. So based on the command that we are giving, it may create an image, or if you want to run from the command line, if you say to run the container, it runs the container. Based on the command line command that we are giving, the Docker server acts accordingly, and it has multiple tasks to do. It can be creating an image or running a container, or it can be anything. So based on the command that we are giving, the Docker server acts accordingly. Okay, so this is something we already talked about. We signed into Docker, installing, log into the Docker and verify Docker installation. Docker installation is nothing but you just need to say Docker version. Let's come back to this later. Let me just show you this slide overview. So when you say Docker version, you will see the version of the Docker. Okay. So you see the version of the Docker, the client versions and all the stuffs. And the only important thing that you have to understand is the OS. So the Docker is basically relying on the Linux OS. And now that's the reason I was asking you to install the Linux kernel, and how actually it is working on the, when it is relying on the Linux OS, you need to understand how actually this is working on the Windows or the Mac machines. So that's the question that strikes into your mind right now. When the Docker is completely relying on the Linux OS, how it is working on the Windows and the Mac OS. So we will have some time for that. Let's discuss that later point of time. But for now, you just need to understand how to verify the Docker installation once it is successfully done. Okay. So now what we are talking about, this Docker run hello world, right? So now from the command line, I'm giving something like this. What I'm giving, Docker run hello world. Okay, so this is the command that we gave into the, in the what is this called, Docker client. Okay, so what is this basically means is, Docker run, what it will do is it to start a new container with the name, with the image name hello world. So there is an image called as hello world. You know what is an image? It is a template, okay, or the blueprint of the container, and that image is used to create a container, to keep it short. So Docker run is, when you use run, by using this image, it will construct a container. It will convert the script to a movie. So Docker run will convert the script to a movie. It will convert an image to a container. Okay. So behind hood, what basically happens is, so let's understand this very clearly. So this is the command line that I'm giving. So I have Docker run. So I have Docker run hello world. Oh, hello world is an image, and run is used to convert this hello world image to a container. Okay, so that is what we have to understand, right? So what are the series of actions that basically happens is, so this Docker client will give this command to the Docker server, and now Docker server understands using this command that the user wants to convert this image called as hello world into a container. So he wants to create a container of the image hello world. So that is what Docker server basically understands. So at the next step, what it basically will do is, Docker server will basically try to search for this image in the local cache. So local cache in the sense, if you see my Docker, so I have multiple images over here, right? So this is an image and images on my disk. So at the later point in the past, I might have used these images. So that's why these were residing on my local machine. So what the Docker server will basically do is, Docker server will try to search for that image hello world in our local machine. Okay, if that is there, if that is not there on the local machine, it goes to something called as Docker Hub, which is the public repository for all the images. Okay, for all the public images. So once this Docker server didn't find that image in the local image cache, it goes to the Docker Hub, and in the Docker Hub it do a search, and it will get that image, and it will create a container of that image. So that will basically happen when we run this command called as Docker run hello world. So hello world is an image. You know what an image is, and we will also understand more about this creating an image and how image basically looks at later point of time. But you know, image is just a script. and this script has to be converted to a movie. So this is a single file which contains all the configurations, dependencies, and the softwares, and this has to be converted into a real platform called as container. So now the Docker client will give this command to the server. Server understands, like, it has to create a container of this image hello world by looking at this command which the Docker client will give. Basically, Docker client will process this into the Docker server understandable language. Okay, it will not directly give this, it will process this into the Docker server understandable language. And now the Docker server, then once it understands the command, it tries to fetch that hello world in the local image cache, which is in my local machine. If this didn't finds that in this local image cache, it finds to the Docker hub, finds that and brings that into the local, and it will provide the necessary, it will do the necessary action. So now let me quickly run this command. So what all happens in this is, it will simply run this hello world. It will simply create the container for this hello world image. Let's not bother about how this hello world actually looks like, how hello world image actually looks like. In fact, don't bother about how actually an image looks like. Let's consider that just as a script. Okay, now let's try to understand only the architecture part, how basically the Docker is building the containers, and how the communication is happening between the Docker CLI and the Docker server, and what are the actions the Docker server is taking based on the command that we are giving from the client. That's the only intention over here. Let's not bother about the commands that are using. Just understand how the communication is happening between the client and the server, what is basically a client and what is basically a server, and what is actually a Docker hub. When the Docker server goes to Docker hub, and how it basically searches, what is its priority search and what is its later search. That's the only intention. Now if I run this particular Docker run hello world, let's look at the output, what is coming out. Okay, so it simply gave me hello from Docker. So this is something that image says. So that image says you have to output hello from Docker onto the console. Okay, so that is what the image is saying. So just carefully read this. This message shows that your installation appears to be working correctly. To generate this message, Docker took the following steps. The Docker client contacted the Docker daemon, which is the Docker server. Okay, you know what is a Docker daemon? We discussed this. The Docker daemon pulled the hello world image from the Docker hub. The Docker daemon created a new container from the image, which runs the executable that produces the output you are currently reading. So it created a container, and that is an executable from the image, which runs the executable that produces the output. So this is the output that is produced. So it created a container from this image called as hello world, and that actually have the output that is currently reading, that you're currently reading. The Docker daemon streamed that output to the Docker client, which sent it to your terminal. So this is output that the container has sent to us. Okay, right. So that is all basically Docker run hello world basically will do. Now let's see how the output will be if I don't have that image in my local cache. So in my local cache, I have this image right now. So let me quickly remove this image from my local cache. So now we want to understand how the output actually looks if I don't have that container in my local. Okay, so that is what I'm just now trying to show you. Just give me a second. Don't bother about these things. I'm just killing all the earlier containers that I have created because it's not allowing me to actually delete that particular image which is downloaded. So let me just kill them. Okay, now we are able to remove that image that we want to remove. Now I'm clearing it again. So the command that we used to create a container is docker run and the image name, which is hello world, right? So this says you have to this command says to the Docker server that you have to create an image with the name hello world, right? So now earlier we have seen an output if the hello world image is there on the local, right? It's like it's in the cached images in my local. Now I don't have this image in my local. Let's see how the output basically looks like. Yeah, if you see the difference, earlier you haven't seen any of these steps, right? Like you are seeing the output directly from here. When this image is not there on the local, in the cached images, what it basically will do is it goes to the hub. So it says unable to find this image locally. So it is pulling this from the libraries from the hub. So it's pulling it, completing it, and it downloaded, and then it is executing it is showing us the output of that particular container. So whatever container is intended to show to us, that output came now, right? This is how basically Docker server works. If it is there, if this image is there on the local cache, it will directly show the output. If it is not there, it will download it from the Docker hub and it will execute now. So now I have that image in my local, right? So I have that image in my local now. So if I say Docker run hello world now again, sorry, that's a different image. It's not, we typed it as hello world, that image is not there. So let me just correct that to hello world. So now look at this output now. So it is not downloading it from the hub, and it didn't even set that unable to find this in the local, unable to find the image locally. It didn't even set that. It find that image locally and it started printing out the output. So that is how basically it will try to search for the images. Okay, is this clear?
Yes, Mohan. So in the real world, there will be a private Docker hub, right? With respect to the organizations.
Correct. It is similar to Maven.
Got it. And
When
the
you
local
have
repo and the
something
remote
in
repo.
the .m2 folder, it will get it from there, or else it will get it from the Maven repository. Similar to that, if it is finding the images in the local repository or the cached images, it will use that image, or else it will get the image from the Docker hub.
Got it, Mohan.
Yeah, that's a simple thing that happens when we use the command called as docker run. Okay, so let's also understand what is docker run as we came here. As I told you, Docker run is the command which is used to construct a container from the image. So when we have an image, and from the image it basically creates a container. It converts the image to a container. Okay, so that's just the remembrance point that you have to have your own here. Okay, now we understood this slide clearly, I guess. Let me go to the PowerPoint again. So we understood this slide now, and this is something that we talked about already, right? So it tries to find the image from the local cache. If it is not there, it goes to the Docker Hub, gets the image from there and place it in the local cache. Okay, so this will always be there in the local cache, but it is not a good practice always to keep these images in the local cache, because it occupies some of your system space. So it is not necessarily needs to be kept over here all the time. Keep it cleared so that you can simply download. It will not take much of your time as well. So it is always a best practice to clear your local cache. Just to show you an example, I just kept this, but in general it is always advisable to clear the images in the local cache, so that you can get much better performance from the hardware that you are using. Okay, now this is all about container, all about how Docker CLI and how Docker server basically interact with each other and how they act to show us the output. Now, the main important point is we have to understand how this container is actually built, how the software is basically installed in the hardware. Okay. So to understand this, again, let's talk about a small story and let's try to understand how this kernel basically works out. How this Docker is actually getting built on the hardware that is provided. Okay. Now, we know image is the script and the container is the movie, right? So now we have to develop this container from the script that is already there. Okay. So let's carefully understand this part, which is the heart for understanding this Docker. I'll try my best to give a better idea on this. Okay. So now I have this scenario. I have a system. Okay. And I have an OS running on it. This is the hardware part of this system. On top of it, we will have an OS. Okay. And we will have different processes that will be running. When I say processes, it can be Chrome, it can be your Notepad, it can be your Firefox, it can be anything that runs on your machine, which will be a process. So let me call this as chrome.exe is one such process which is running on your machine. So one is chrome.exe. The other process that is running in your machine is Notepad, and other is Firefox, and the other is Zoom, and the other is Skype. So now let's take this scenario like this. Okay, this is how basically this works out. So in this hardware part, what all we will have hard disk, which is a physical component. We will have a CPU. We will have a memory sticks and all the stuff, right? This is all hardware kind of part. We will have the cooling fans or the cooling system, whatever it is. So in the hardware part, we will have hard disk, and we will have, let's say, we will have CPU, and we will also have memory sticks, and we will also have cooling systems. So this is all the hardware part. On top of it, we will have the OS. It can be Windows, Linux, or whatever it is. We call this as kernel in particular. So now what basically happens is, so for every process to run, it is like a microprocessor kind of thing. Maybe if you are aware of microprocessor or not, I'm not sure. So what basically happens here is when we want to use the Chrome, it sends a command to this kernel. So based on the command that it is giving to the kernel will redirect that to the specific hardware or to the CPU or to the memory sticks or whatever it is, or to any of the softwares. This basically kernel is responsible to understand the system call that this particular process is giving. So it is responsible to understand the system call. System call is nothing but the process call. So whatever the process call that is being given by this particular process, it is the kernel is responsible to understand that, and it has to allocate the resources according to the request. Okay, let's say in a notepad I have to say something, I wrote something, now I'm saving it. Once I clicked on the save, a system call is being made to the kernel, asking the kernel to save the data that is entered into the notepad into a particular hard disk. So the kernel is responsible to understand the call, and it will act accordingly, or it will accordingly distribute the uh, resources that are available, or the hardware resources that are available. So that is how basically it happens. So this kernel is nothing but the OS that are available. Let's say it is Windows or Mac or Linux, whatever it is. So the particular OS is responsible to actually mitigate or use, or this particular kernel is responsible to provide the resources for this particular processes that are running on top of that OS. It can be Chrome, Notepad, and we can also call it as multi-threading. So when multi-threading is in progress, so when multiple processes are in progress, the kernel has to listen to everything and has to allocate the resources accordingly based on the based on the space that is available. So let's say I have a process of 2 GB RAM which can support maximum 3 processes running on my machine. So the kernel will allocate the processes to the first 3 opened instances. For the rest, they will not respond until unless we kill this. So that is allocation of the resources is the responsibility of this kernel. Okay, so that is the whole point, and this is how basically our entire system works. So this kernel is responsible to understand or to develop a bridge between the bridge between the systems or the processes that are running and allocating the resources that are available under it. So that is what the kernel basically does. It basically governs the access between the programs running on the computer and the physical hardware connected to the computer. So this is clear, right? How basically the kernel is establishing or understanding the system calls and acting accordingly on the hardware resources. So this is clear, right?
Yes, Mohan.
Okay. Now, what this basically does is let's say I need, so these two have some dependencies to work. Okay, Chrome has a dependency to work on, and the Firefox also has a dependency to work on. Okay, so this is the Chrome and this is the Firefox that is available, right? So the Chrome needs something to actually work, which is like it needs Python version of 3. For this process to run, it needs Python version 3, and Firefox is something which needs version 2 to run. So this is the prerequisite that is required for these softwares to run. So this Chrome.exe requires Python version 3 and this Firefox requires Python version 2. Okay, so that's the prerequisite, and the system call given by these things to the kernel understands that yes, when I want to run Chrome exe, I need Python version 3. When I want to run Firefox, I need Python version 2. Then what this kernel basically has to do? What do you think this kernel has to do in this particular kind of scenario? And we know it is impossible to install different versions of the same software in a particular machine. So in this machine, I cannot install Python 2 as well as Python 3 at the same point of time. Correct?
Yes, Mohan. The OS allows only one version.
So what would be the solution for this?
Maybe a virtualization of our existing machine. So if we, yeah, so if we, let's just say if we go with the VMware, we can convert one physical machine into multiple machines, right, by allocating memory. In that case, we can install different type of programming versions of Python.
No. What I'm saying is, like, maybe my explanation is wrong. So try to understand it this way. So for running a web app, I need all these softwares. Okay, and I cannot install Firefox on a different machine and the Chrome on a different machine. They both have to run on the same OS. I mean, on the same system.
Okay. So I think, like you explained earlier, Docker will configure all these things, right?
So the solution for this is, it will divide this kernel part. So for this particular process, what it will do is, this kernel is a software again. On the other, at the end, this is a software. So this software is installed on a particular space. So now the better solution is, so divide the kernel this way. Okay, so this is the kernel, and in this kernel I have a hard disk. Okay, I have a hard disk inside which I install Python version 3. Okay, inside this I install Python version 3, and again for this particular Firefox, again I will create another I will divide the kernel again into multiple paths. Okay, so this is a different part. Again, I will have a hard disk over here. Whatever components that are there over here, I mean, hard disk will be divided into multiple parts. CPU will be divided into multiple parts, and memory stick will be divided into multiple parts, and the cooling system will also be divided. Cooling system, it is not actually, that's a wrong statement. Cooling system is something which is common for the entire system, but the memory stick allocation has to be divided. So let's say if I want to run 4 processors with different versions, I need to divide this memory stick into 4 parts, and I have to allocate each memory stick to one particular division. So on the final day, how it basically looks like is, so this is how I am dividing the entire system into multiple parts. Okay, so how on the end, how this basically looks like is, so this is the kernel, and this is my container 1. This is my division 2. This is my division 3. Consider this as my division 3. So inside this, whatever hardware, let's say I have 10 GB of hard disk. Okay, I have 10 GB of hard disk. So what I will do now is, I will configure the hardware into these 3 systems. Okay, this is one of my hardwares, and this is the hardware system allocation for this, and this is the hardware. So I'll allocate 3 GB over here. I'll allocate 3 GB of hard disk over here, and 3 GB of hard disk over here, and 4 GB of hard disk over here. Again, I'll also create multiple CPUs for this system differently, this system differently, and this system differently. So now this kernel which is there at the center knows what is there in each and every subsystems. So whenever it wants to run Chrome on this particular machine, whenever it wants to run the process of Chrome on this particular hardware, let's say I install Python version 3. On this particular version, I install Python version 3. On this, I install Python version 2. Okay. So I have installed, I splitted the hardware systems into multiple parts so that I am able to divide them. So this doesn't know what is there in this particular hardware and this doesn't know what is there in this particular hardware, so that we will be able to install the different versions of software. To understand it clearly, let's say I have one laptop. In one laptop, we know we cannot install the same softwares, and I mean same software with different versions. But if I have two systems, on system 1 I can install Python version 3, on the system 2 I can install Python version 3. The same is been happening over here. We are splitting the resources, and one resource doesn't have any idea on the other resource, but kernel have idea on all the things that are available and how the split is basically happened in the hardware. So whenever it wants to run the Chrome and it knows that Chrome is needing Python version 3, so that request will be redirected to this particular hard disk. When we are running Firefox, the kernel knows it needs version v2, so it redirects the traffic to this particular hardware system. Okay, so this is chrome.exe and this needs for Python version 3, right? So this needs Python version 3. So what this kernel will basically will do is, it will redirect, the kernel understands this and it redirects to this particular thing. And when it is Firefox, it will simply redirect that to this particular hardware system. So this is how basically the different versions of the software can be handled. So each part of this is called as container. So this is how basically the container will be created in a hardware. So depending on its requirements, a separate hardware will also be allocated. And for that container alone, let's say the container needs few softwares. Let's say one container, a image that is created needs Python version 3, Chrome version 2, Firefox version 3, whatever it is. So these all softwares, to install all these softwares, whatever memory that is, what are the resources that are needed for this particular image will be separated from the whole hardware that is available, and this is called as container. Each subpart which will be created is called as container. Got it?
Yeah, no.
The whole point here is, let's say this is image 1 which needs Chrome, which needs Python version 3, and we will have another image which needs Python version 2. But this could be a small program and we cannot allocate the whole system for this. Instead of this, it is simply dividing the resources, and it is just taking whatever amount that is needed and it is just installing it, and it is dividing that from the entire hardware that is available, and we call this as a container. So this is how basically a container looks like. So this we call it as container 1, this is container 2, and this is container 3. And every time we convert an image to a container, a separate hardware will be allocated that is sufficient to install the softwares that is mentioned in this particular image file, and the rest will be left like that, so that another image, when we are running another image, that image can use the rest of the resources that are available, and it will be binded as a container. Okay, so if you look at the container, this is what I'm calling it as a container. So if you look at the container, it has all the hardware that is necessary. It also have the OS, and it also have the softwares running processes that needs to be installed. So this has everything packed. That's why I'm saying like it is a container which is sufficient, which is enough, to run in any kind of environments. The only thing that it needs is a hardware, so that the image that is created will take care of getting the resources or dividing the resources that are available as a hardware. Okay, so this is how basically a container actually will be created based on the processes that are needed. Okay, so if I go to the slide now, so this is very important. I'm saying if you don't understand this, please let me know. I'll again explain you the stuffs. So this is how basically software looks like, or the processes that are running in a system look like. So these are all like processes running on a computer. So it can be Chrome, it can be Terminal, Spotify, or the Node.js. So they give system calls to our OS, running program issues requested to kernel to interact with a piece of hardware. So every process that is running in some or the other way needs the calculations ability, storage ability, and the long storage abilities. I mean the cache is needed as well as the long storage is needed. So the request will be sent to the kernel. The kernel is responsible to allocate the resources. So this is how a general software basically works out, or the general system basically works out. Right. So now we need to understand. Now this is the scenario we were talking about. The Chrome needs Python version 2 and the Node.js needs Python version 3. Then what this basically kernel can do on the hard disk, only one part, only Python version 2 is available, and the Chrome will not work in that scenario. The kernel also doesn't know what is basically what it has to do, because it cannot install multiple versions of the same software. So for that, the solution can be this one. The hard disk that is available can be segmented into multiple fractions. We call this as name mapping actually. Sorry, it is called as namespacing. We will dig deep into namespacing later, but if it divides the hard disk into multiple parts or into the segments, and into each and every segment, if it is capable to install the Python version 2, based on the system call, whichever process that is needed, which process is making the call, the kernel analyze that, and accordingly it will allocate that particular resource, whether it is Python 2 or Python 3. If it is Chrome, this allocates Python 2. If it is Python, this allocates the Python 3. Right. So that is what basically the container is. So we need Chrome, we need container Python 2 for Chrome. So what this will basically do is this will create a subpart with all the resources available within it. So it has a hard disk, it has the kernel, it has the version. So this will be packed as a container. So this is called as container. This all happens in the system. This is not like separating continually, but allocation is done like on the hardware. A particular hardware part is divided, and that is like bought into a single unit. So none from the outside should be able to access this softwares. So that is what basically a containerization is. So dividing the whole hardware that is available into multiple parts, so that each and everything can be used. So this is basically called as container. Clear what is basically a container is and what happens with the containerization? It's just an hardware split based on the requirements of and the software that is given or the data that is given on the images.
So Mohan, all this configuration splitting in the local system will be done and given by the developer, right?
Yes. No. These configurations are automatically done by the Docker. So you just need to run that command, docker run, and the image name. So in the image, whatever you give, accordingly the specification, according to that, whatever hardware that it needs, it will be automatically allocated by the Docker itself. It takes that from the hardware by default. It doesn't need to bother about allocating the resources in the Docker.
Okay, got it, Mohan.
Yeah, it is all the responsibility. Splitting the hardware resources based on the processes that you want to run or the image that you want to run is the responsibility of the Docker. It is not our responsibility, but we are just trying to understand what is happening in the behind hoods. That's pretty much. Okay, so this is how a particular, let's say I want to create a container with a Chrome running in it. So this is how it will be created. Okay, so nothing else will be there in that, only a Chrome will be running on top of that in that container. In the similar fashion, if you want to run a web app, only that web app will be running in that container, and it will have all the resources that are needed to run that web app configured in the hard disk. Okay, so this is how we have to understand the container. So to bring it out, if you divide the container, so it have everything along with the other containers we have under this kernel. The simple unit of the kernel looks like, so it has the single process that is running on this kernel, because we created this container for running the Chrome alone. So the Chrome will be running on top of it, and what are all the resources that are needed to run this Chrome will be there in this hardware, network, RAM, and CPU. So these are all the computing agents or the hardware that is needed to run a particular process. So those will be a small part of the bigger hard disk will be allocated for this particular process, and we call this entire unit as a container. Okay, so this is what basically container is. Is that clear? This is
Yes,
very
Mohan.
understanding of a container. Prakash, Venu, Kati.
Okay, Mohan.
Clear kada? Advain kada? గణేష్
అర్థమైంది భయ్యా.
క్లియర్ ఉందా? ఇది ఇంపార్టెంట్ చాలా, అందుకోసం.
ఎస్ ఎస్.
వేణు now if you understand this, we will go to the next step. So the next step is, let's just try understanding. Let's not bother about what to say images. I'll also show you how image basically looks and how to create an image in couple of minutes. But before that, let's understand few scenarios. Like, we understand what is Docker run, right? What Docker run will basically do?
It just tries to look into the local repository first, local cache. If the image is available over there, it takes and runs it. It gives us the output, or else it just looks into the Docker Hub and downloads it and runs it and gives the output.
So that is basically the process. But Docker run will create a container for the image that we are giving.
Right.
So when I say Docker run and the image name, this is the image name which will be there in the Docker Hub. So for this image, it is allocating the resources and creating a container and showing us the output, right?
Right.
So now I have something called as Docker run hello world. Let me put this in the notepad or the notepad++. That would be better. So the first command that we learned is Docker run and the image name, right? So this will creates a container for the image. We know what is a container as well, right? Now the next command is, so Docker run image name and the command is basically a overriding command. Okay, so by default, when we say hello world, Docker run hello world, we are seeing hello world, right? So that is basically the default output that image is giving. But if you want to override that output, we have to use this command. So in this command, if we say echo hi there, what happens is, instead of the default output that this image is printing, it will print this particular output, right? So this output that the image is giving will be overridden by the command. Okay, so before understanding this, we have to understand one more concept, right? Let's understand what is basically a image first, then we will come it here, then that would be the great way, I guess. So the image can be divided into two parts. Okay, so every image that is there, every image that we create can be divided into two parts. Okay, let me look at the slide, is there or not? Yes. So if you look at this is the image and this is the container, right? So image have two parts, right? One is the snapshot. FS means file system snapshot, and the startup command. What is this file system snapshot and what is the startup command? Okay, file system snapshot is nothing but this says this is the snapshot. I mean, it's a script kind of thing. So based on this, based on the image, when we run docker run and the image name, this file system snapshot will be created inside this kernel. I mean, for this container, a subpart of the total hardware will be allocated. In that hardware, whatever snapshot, this file system snapshot is there, that will be configured or that will be installed. For this particular thing to run, for this particular web app to run or this process to run, we need two softwares. One is Chrome and the other one is Python. So those two will be installed inside this sub hardware that is been allocated for this container. Okay, so this is one part, file system snapshot. It can be any number of softwares, like it can be Java or it can be Maven or it can be Jenkins or whatever it is. Whatever software that is needed for us, that will be mentioned in the snapshot, and the same will be replicated inside this hardware that is allocated for this container. Replicate in the sense those will be installed over here in the container. How this installation happens and all, let's look at that later. So from this image, when we are running docker run and the image, so and we give the image name, this docker run command will put the snapshots or install the snapshot softwares into the hardware, and there is something called a startup command. So once this installation is done, it will run this command called as run Chrome. So once this installation is done, it will run the Chrome, so that output of this container will be, you will see the Chrome process running. So that is basically the output is. In the similar fashion, when we have docker run hello world, the developer says once the software and once the hardware allocation and installation of the software is done for the hello world, it should print out hello world as the output. So it should print out this message, hello from Docker. So this is the developer given startup command. Once the image container is created for this image, this is the output that is given in the startup command. So he says log.message this message, so that this message is getting printed. Let's say if he says something else, that something else will be printed over here. So that is what basically startup command is. Once the container is created from the FS snapshot, what is the first command that needs to be run? Okay, so that is basically what a startup command is. So once the startup command is, once the image is created by mentioning the startup command, we cannot change that startup command again once the image is already created. If you want to change the startup command again, we have to create another image with a different startup command. Let's say in this image I created startup command as run Chrome. In the if I want to change this to run Python, I have to create another image. I cannot change the startup command of the created image. Do you understand what is the startup command means? So startup command is nothing but what is the first command that needs to be executed, or what is the command that needs to be executed once the container is created. So once you say docker run hello world, it configured the hardware that is needed and it is showing us the output. It executed something called some command, and that some command gave this output for us. So that output you will see over here. Is that clear?
Clear more.
Now, if you want to override the startup command, so I don't want to see this output, I want to override this. So if I want to override this, so what I'll show you a good example for this. So let's say instead of hello world, I'll also tell you why I'm not executing hello world right away after showing this example for you all. So I'm executing docker run busybox. Okay, so when I executed docker run busybox, so busybox is again something like a image in the Docker Hub. Okay, so this docker run busybox doesn't have anything. It is not showing any output. It means like startup command doesn't have anything to print to the console. Like hello world, docker busybox doesn't have any startup command to print something or to print some data to the console. Okay, whatever data that comes in the console, you will see it over here. Something like hello world has something like hello from Docker, but busybox doesn't have something. So to specify something or to override that command, startup command, we have something called as you need to specify that at the end. like docker run busybox echo hi there. So this will be executed at the end. Okay. Hi there shouldn't be any gaps. So if you see earlier when we run docker run busybox, it doesn't have anything to be printed, but now we overrided that startup command so that it is executing this command once the container is created, and that output is shown over here. Okay, got it. And also there is something like ls in the Linux commands. What this ls will basically do, it will show us all the file systems, right? So it is showing us all the file systems. So when there is nothing like startup command, or if you want to override the startup command, you have to specify that command at the end so that that output you will see at the end. So once this particular docker, I mean container is created on the containers terminal, whatever you're going here, that will be executed and the output will be shown here. So this where it is like on the ls.
Mohan, can't hear you now.
So now this